Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly news update. It's always a pleasure and a privilege and an honor for me to sit with you and get some of these headlines and catch up on the things that are going on in our world. And I'm so thankful for all of you here on the chat. See quite a few of you that have already started to join us. And so say shalom one to another. You are the remnant. You are that few and very unique group that are awake in this hour. Most people are, boy, they're dead asleep. And so I'm so grateful for every one of you who are awake, who are aware, who are seeing the things that are happening in the world, and certainly watching as Bible prophecy is coming to pass, a scriptural prophecy coming to pass right before our very eyes. And speaking of prophecy coming to pass, we're sitting here. I'm listening right now as the rain continues throughout the day. So we're enjoying even more rain again here at New Kingdom in Arizona, and are so thankful for the answer to prayers and for His blessing that continues. And so we're well over 4.5 inches now since Sukkot, and we're just keeping track because we haven't even hit the rain season. The rain season doesn't begin in this area till late June. So this is all bonus. It's not supposed to be raining this time of year here. So it's a tremendous blessing to see it. And I'm so thankful for it. I'm thankful for every one of you that give me a 5x5. Let me know that you can hear me okay. We don't want to have any audio problems. That we've been having some battles this last few weeks. So thank you for your help there. And if you're joining us for the first time, we want to encourage every one of you to bookmark our website, remnantwatch.com. All the stories that we're going to share tonight are going to be here on Remnant Watch. And again, it's a labor of love. You won't find a bunch of pop-ups. You're not going to find us selling a bunch of things. Everything that you see here is provided by the members of this house who are banded together, not only for the preaching of the gospel, but for the awakening of the remnant. And so we're so thankful for every one of you that are awake in this hour, that are not being fooled by the cares of this world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the lusts of other things. And one of the things that we like to say around here, especially with regard to the news, because it can be a little bit much, especially as we walk toward these days. And many of you are starting to get why we have this theme. We want to be informed without being overwhelmed. And this is a very big and important theme as we move forward. If you get too much information too often, it can overwhelm you, it can bring in anxiety, it can prevent you from being effective. And you need to be moving in the thing that you are called to do in this hour. So just know that we don't like to be overwhelmed, but we do need to keep our eyes open. The scripture requires us to watch. In fact, the Natsarim are those who watch over the Torah, watch over the commandments, and keep an eye for the coming of the King. And so with that, let's get into the news. And beginning in tonight's top story, which of course I don't think anybody is super surprised by, but nevertheless, we're seeing, this effect that is starting to happen here. And Iran's commander is among the dead after an Israeli bombing, revenge after 2 generals are killed in an Israeli airstrike. So Iran is vowing revenge. And this is going to get heated, folks. One of the things that I keep an eye on is how the war effort is going in the Middle East. Is it going to expand, right? This is one of the things that we've been keeping an eye on. And I keep seeing this effort, and I think you're all noticing it, that they're trying desperately to expand this conflict. They want to bring other countries into it. They want to make it into a more expansive, if they could, a world war. And so this is a very dangerous development that we're seeing here. And of course, Iran is vowing revenge. So, this is what they want. They want Iran to vow revenge. They want Iran in a shooting war. This was part of the Albert Pike program that was written in the late 1800s. So we're watching a script. Iran has vowed revenge after Israeli warplanes destroyed the Iranian consulate in Damascus, killing at least 11 people, including a major senior commander in the Al-Quds force of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Iran's leaders in Tehran described the targeting of a diplomatic mission late on Monday as unprecedented and promised a harsh response. And of course, what we're seeing here is the systematic destruction of Damascus. And if you remember in the scripture, Damascus is prophesied to become a ruinous heap. And so we're watching that very thing manifesting in real time. And again, it's not happening all at once, which I think a lot of scriptural students thought, prophecy students thought perhaps it would happen all at once. It's happening piece by piece, little by little, and it is destructive. And again, solving problems with bombs. So I don't know what problems just got solved, but they keep trying this method as if more bombs will solve more problems. And again, we do not take sides in these conflicts. We only report on them. But I can tell you that we are on the side of peace, and we are on the side of the children who are going to be massively victims, disproportionately victims, either by direct physical violence attack or by the loss of their parents. And in either case, they become victims. And so this is who we advocate for and are praying for cooler heads to prevail. And the Jerusalem Post is reporting a strategic blow. So they're calling it a strategic strike. I guess it's part of a grand strategy to attack this target. An alleged Israeli airstrike takes out Iranian general in Damascus. The strike killed Mohammad Reza Zahidi, a top commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, according to a report on Reuters, citing a security source in Lebanon. And so this is how this war is progressing. It is a sad thing to watch, of course, as we watch these events unfold. But nevertheless, we knew these things were coming, as the scripture foretells. And of course, Mashiach directly said there will be wars and rumors of wars. And so we have seen, oh my goodness, since the founding of the United States of America, I don't think there's been 20 years without a war. So we're seeing just a continuous ramp up, and this is reaching a pitch that is, foretelling of the days ahead. And so we need to be aware that this is part of the plan, and we may see a lot more of that. And as a matter of fact, just, because why not? Russia is now sending several of its warships into the Red Sea amid the Houthi attack. So this just happened. This just in, right? So several Russian warships have passed the Bab al-Mandab Strait into the Red Sea, the Russian's Navy Pacific Fleet says, amid attacks by Yemen's Houthis on merchant shipping. So it's unclear as to how this is going to unfold, but you don't have, it's not going to be better with more war-making capability in the region, especially with those bent on instigating a war using whatever means necessary. And that's exactly what we saw with the attack in Moscow. Many of you are aware of that, of course, and as a result of that attack, a declaration was made by the Russian ambassador that there can be no improvements in relations with the United States. And in fact, they called it impossible under the Biden regime, according to the ambassador. Russian ambassador to the U.S., Anatoly Anatov, has issued a dire assessment of the current state of U.S.-Russia relations. In an interview with Russia's Channel 1, he said that no one should expect relations with Washington to improve at all under President Joe Biden. So as much as they, like to play political games, at the end of the day, this is definitely, yes, I do believe it is a powder keg. And we are watching a fireworks show. And if you've ever been to a 4th of July, you've all been to 4th of July fireworks shows. They set off the little ones first, and they get you warmed up for the grand finale. And so I believe that's what we're headed for. And as a matter of fact, Russia has demanded that in response to these terrorist attacks in Moscow, Russia is demanding that Ukraine arrest the Secret Service head for its terrorist attack. So again, we're watching a shift in the way in which war is executed, where they're actually prosecuting the leaders as opposed to just fighting military. So this is an interesting thing we've been watching. We're seeing a lot of different rhetoric. And what is it when they bomb an embassy and kill a specific general? Isn't that execution of a specific individual, right? So Moscow, the Russian Foreign Ministry said on Sunday that it conveyed to Ukraine its demand that those involved in terrorist attacks on Russian territory, including Ukrainian Security Service (SBU) head Vasyl Malyuk, be arrested and seated to Moscow. And Moscow will send missiles and bombs until they get what they want. So this is going to get worse. The Russian Foreign Ministry conveyed to the Ukrainian authorities demands under the International Convention for the Suppression of Terrorist Bombings and the International Convention for the Suppression of the Financing of Terrorism for the immediate arrest and handover of all persons involved in these terrorist attacks. And did you catch that last part? Financing of terrorism. So this is going to come for some other players as well. The list of wanted people, including Malyuk, who admitted on March 25th to having been involved in organizing the Crimean Bridge explosion and revealed details of other terrorist attacks in Russia. And so I think this is also going to be an area of expansion. I think you're going to see, again, more prosecution of individuals as opposed to, just armies having at it. And I wouldn't be surprised to see these armies themselves start turning over guilty parties rather than going at it against one another. So this is we're about to see some twists and turns that I don't think anybody saw coming. So it's really important for us to kind of stay vigilant in this hour, and all the more reason for us to be wise about where we are, what our surroundings are, because again, they're looking for ways to provoke conflict. And that is not a good thing. In fact, these headlines continue to drop. And one of the things that we like to do around here, folks, is we like to keep an eye on the narrative, right? So we want to see where are they trying to take us mentally? Because remember, this is a battlefield of the mind. And so we've been watching this type of rhetoric continue coming out of Poland. Polish Prime Minister Tusk warns Europe has entered a pre-war era. So, literally letting everyone know, what does pre-war mean? It means we're going to war. This is just a ramp up. And again, you're acting as if the opponent's just going to sit still while you get organized. It's crazy what we're watching here. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has warned that of the real threat of conflict in Europe, saying that for the first time since the end of World War II, so we're about to bring in World War III, the continent has entered a pre-war era. War is no longer a concept from the past. It is real, and it started over 2 years ago. The most worrying thing at the moment is that literally any scenario is possible. Well, that's about the most truthful thing I've read so far. Anything is possible. And I think that's why we need to be careful about making blanket judgments or picking sides or any of that. I think that's exactly what they want happening. It's the old divide and conquer technique. And usually they're controlling both sides. Remember, we're watching the destruction of good and evil. So it's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or the tree of death, literally fighting one end to the other. And of course, both sides call the other evil. So this is how this works. Okay. And all they have to do, and they've been doing this for centuries, all they have to do is label these guys bad guys, and the other guys label the other guy bad guys. And next thing you know, you got people going at it. And one of the things that is starting to shift, and we watch this and we've been talking about this, is the way in which they're prosecuting the war in Gaza. And the threats are against the particular leaders. So again, just as they just executed an Iranian general, I believe that the counter effort is going to be attacking specific leaders. And I think they're starting to figure that out, that despite however they may come out of this war, they may still face serious repercussions for their actions. So this is really interesting. And I think this is what's changing policy. So take a look at this. U.S. is no longer willing to provide some weapons to Israel that it's asked for because of American military readiness. So they're using military readiness as an excuse. But the reality is, I believe that they're starting to realize that there are going to be implications. The United States hasn't given Israel every weapon it's asked for as it continues military operations against Hamas in Gaza, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff told reporters on Thursday. Although we've been supporting them with capability, they've not received anything they've asked for. And there's a reason for this. Scotland has just said that it will be intervening in the International Criminal Court case against Israel that was brought by South Africa. Many of you were aware of that. We talked about that months ago. And now it looks as if that case is actually going forward. So any country that is then supporting or supplying Israel, if it's determined that they are in fact in violation of human rights laws, if you will, international laws, then there will be individual prosecutions. And so again, this is cooling a lot of people who otherwise would be, go war. They've got quite a bit of pushback going on, and right here in Israel itself, Netanyahu has criticized. Their critics are becoming mobile. So the war slowed this down. If you remember, we were watching this buildup of anti-Netanyahu, anti-government protests, especially up to and leading up to the war beginning in October. If you remember, if you guys are watching, you knew this, right? Well, then it got cooled down because of the conflict. It was, pretty dangerous to do this. Well, now tens of thousands of Israelis are demonstrating, and they're doing it on Shabbat evening in front of the military headquarters in Tel Aviv in the biggest protest against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu since the terrorist attack of October 7th. So they were successful in sort of bringing down the attention and sort of calming some of this, and now it's restoking. During the demonstration, a group of roughly 20 hostage families called on Netanyahu to resign. So this is now being publicly declared. They say that for his own political reasons, he isn't pushing hard enough for a deal with Hamas. So he wants to continue the war. I believe they had a belief and a strategy that it would unite the nation. And maybe that worked in the past without so much light. You could just paint someone with a bad guy target on them, and everyone would just get on board. But it's not working. Okay, so more light is shining than ever before, and I believe that's causing some serious problems with this plan that they came up with in the 1800s and are still trying to execute. I mean, it's right there. It's not even hidden. Type in Google Albert Pike and three wars, and you'll be able to read exactly what they said a long time ago. And so this is talk about the Simpsons. This is and then I think they're calling us all a bunch of simps if we're falling for it, right? And so this is why I think it's starting to fall apart as they try to execute this plan. And Netanyahu is being accused of provoking the crisis with the White House for domestic politics. So again, make himself look tough, make himself look a certain way, and it keeps backfiring, which is interesting. Are you guys praying or something? Is there some light you're praying for? Because this isn't working. The White House sees the public rift with Israel over a UN Security Council resolution as an artificial crisis manufactured by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for domestic political reasons, 3 U.S. officials told Axios. And of course, there was a cancellation, and then there was a reinstatement of a visit that we saw to Washington, D.C. You remember that Benny Gantz came here, and it was called an unauthorized visit. It's the fracturing of the coalition. It's the fracturing of their plan. It's not going according to plan. And unfortunately, this is going to continue to be a major issue. and I believe a lot of the fronts and the financial mechanisms that they were using in the past to try to execute some of these things are also suffering some serious problems. Of course, Sam Bankman Fried didn't get away. He got 25-year sentence for FTX, which we found out. I mean, it wasn't even hidden that it was being used to launder money and used to um, support different things that were going on. So a lot of this infrastructure is also under attack. And this is going to be very interesting to watch as it unfolds. But I can tell you that from what I'm seeing, a lot of what they expected to go a certain way just isn't going the way that they planned. And so we're going to continue to watch this with great interest. And speaking of watching with interest, another area of major conflict here in this hemisphere. Many of you remember that we reported on the barbecue man in Haiti, and now that situation has really degraded. They're reporting this last week is Haitian situation is cataclysmic. Now, this may be used as a cover just to bring the UN troops in, and I think they need a win. So if they can clean up this mess, well, that might justify them going into other areas. Can you see the pattern building? The situation in chaos-racked Haiti is, quote, cataclysmic, with more than 1,500 people killed by gang violence so far this year and more weapons pouring into the country, the UN said Thursday. In a fresh report, the United Nations Rights Office detailed how corruption, impunity, and poor governance, compounded by increasing levels of gang violence, had eroded the rule of law and brought state institutions close to collapse. This, it said, had left late Haiti in a cataclysmic situation. And so, where do you think we're going here, folks? Well, my suspicion is they're going to give a win to the UN as they clean up this, mess, if you will, round up these guys and make it look like the UN is the good guys. And so, a lot of this, I think, is theatrics, but I do believe that there are people in harm's way. And so, if you have family on that island, you should be praying for them. And we pray for their safety because, again, the remnant are everywhere. And that's the real target here, folks. Always has been, always will be. Speaking of crazy, this I just heard. We all were watching news about the eclipse, and we're going to get to that here in a moment. But did you know that on the same day that we're about to see this solar eclipse that everybody is freaking out about, which honestly have never seen so much chatter and activity over an eclipse? I mean, that there's something else going on here, folks, because we've all, I mean, even younger people have at least lived through at least a couple of these. And those of us that are a little older, we've seen eclipses come and go. And we've never seen the National Guard called out. As I pointed out last week, just the fact that, 100,000 people are going to be in a county, we got to call out the National Guard. Well, and that's the standard. Then every state fair better have the National Guard present. And every football game when they have extra people, my goodness. It just doesn't pass the smell test. It doesn't make sense. And now to add to add more drama to the situation, we got to have CERN. CERN. Are you concerned about CERN? Well, CERN is about to test the world's most powerful particle accelerator, which is just a big giant magnet, during April's solar eclipse to search for invisible matter. Yeah, because that's the perfect day. Uh, so there you go. We're going to have particle accelerators during April's solar eclipse to search for the invisible matter that secretly powers our universe. Well, we could tell you what secretly powers your universe. All things are held together by the word of his power, according to the scripture. And so when they get down to the subatomic level or the quark level, they know that, and they've learned that all things are held together by sound. Well, isn't that interesting? It's exactly what the scripture says. All things held together by the word of his power. So this is just a big waste of time. But I do think that there's some other effects that this may, in fact, affect, like brainwave frequencies and control of mass numbers of people. I think that's the real reason for CERN. I have a suspicion that it's really some type of mental tech more than it is scientific tech for exploration of dark matter. I think the dark matter they're trying to get to penetrate is your mind. The world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator is set smash protons. I think it's supposed to say set to smash protons together on April 8th to search for invisible particles secretly powering our universe. Theories have suggested that there are 17 different particle groups. Oh, give me a break. I get a little annoyed with some of these cover stories because that's all they are, folks. They're just cover stories. Now the team has restarted the LHC with hopes they're going to, everything's going to be positive and wonderful of unraveling more mysteries in the universe. It's a good thing Elohim is in charge because I think these guys would have long ago blown up the entire world. And I'm wondering if they aren't trying to create some kind of cataclysm to fulfill their Depop ideas, right? And so not to be undone, because after all, NASA has to always do something to get itself in the news. And here we go, folks. NASA is going to fire 3 rockets at the solar eclipse because why not? Because that's just a great day to do that, right? So NASA has announced it will fire 3 scientific sounding rockets into the moon's shadow on Monday, April 8th, during a partial solar eclipse across North America. In what will be a total solar eclipse for a 115-mile wide path through parts of Mexico and 15 U.S. states. So they have decided it's 15 and not 13. That's interesting. And Canada, and a partial solar eclipse for the entire Americas. The event will see a sudden drop in sunlight. So the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give her light. The space agency's project, Atmospheric Perturbations Around the Eclipse Pass, will investigate how the drop in sunlight and temperature affects Earth's upper atmosphere. APEP is named after the serpent deity. You can't make this up. Are you joking me? Right? Because why not? And everybody just looks the other way and yawns while these boys are basically doing rituals and worship onto false deities. And again, this is right out of NASA directly, so can't argue with this. NASA launched sounding rockets into the moon's shadow during the solar eclipse. And of course, it's going to study how upper atmosphere is affected when sunlight momentarily dims over a portion of the planet. We're going to study darkness. I don't even know what to say. I mean, some of this stuff is just, it's beyond crazy. So you have to chuckle because you're just like, are we really watching this? The atmospheric perturbations around the eclipse path sounding rockets will launch from NASA's Wallops flight facility in Virginia to study the disturbances in the ionosphere created when the moon eclipses the sun. The sounding rockets have been previously launched and successfully recovered from White Sands test facilities, not that far from here in New Mexico, during the October 2023 annual solar eclipse. They have been refurbished with new instrumentation and will be relaunched in April. So this is for sure going to be spectacular. It's almost as if they're trying to prevent something from arriving, is what it looks like to me. It's almost like, they're prepping for war against Mashiach, right? So, and not to, again, put alarm into people, but this is something that has been reported. And we know that there have been other efforts to shut communication down. We saw interruptions with Meta, which shook a lot of people. We saw during one of the solar flares, of course, we've had several solar flares since then that didn't knock out communication, so they can't quite get that straight. But they are telling you in advance that they plan on shutting off. I mean, things might happen to cell phones ahead of the April 8th solar eclipse. So this is something that everyone should at least be aware of, especially if you are on the East Coast of the United States. And in New York, it says New York issues a cell phone warning ahead of April 8th solar eclipse, which I think you should take seriously, that they may interrupt cellular service. Staten Island, New York, a total eclipse will be visible across the United States on April 8th, offering a spectacular view of the rare phenomenon, and states are preparing for potential disruptions. An eclipse will pass over, blah, 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 and during this time, the sky will darken. Okay. For the first time in decades, New York will be in the path of the total eclipse, so New York is in the path of this eclipse. It means hundreds of thousands of people are expected to see the phenomenon. Now, officials in New York are warning that existing cellular networks could be negatively impacted on the day of the eclipse and possibly in the days before. Wow. So that's interesting. They're not only warning that it could happen at the eclipse, but it could happen before it. So again, folks, I think that you're seeing a lot of prep for a tightening of control over population, over the people, over various elements that we know are reality. Okay. And there are things that are in fact affecting our atmosphere. Remember, we talked about the story. It's right there on Remnant Watch, where there were over 2,000 earthquakes uh, off the coast of, I think it was Vancouver and down through northern Washington and so forth in like a very short amount of time. And so the earth is definitely reacting, right? So we're seeing that. Well, now we've got this story out of Florida where the coast was hit by 4,000 lightning strikes in 15 minutes. Now, that is definitely newsworthy. There's something cooking in the atmosphere. There's something changing. And so some of this is, I think, natural. Some of it is being affected by experimentation. Nearly 4,000 lightning bolts off the southwest Florida coast in just 15 minutes on Wednesday. Want to talk about something that will interrupt power supplies? There you go. A total of 3,946 lightning strikes were recorded in the Gulf of Mexico, west of the cities of Naples and Fort Myers, according to Wink in Fort Myers. Okay. And so this became big news. There was look at this ball of lightning strikes that were happening. So we don't really know what the cause of it is, but there's definitely that is something affecting the atmosphere so that it would concentrate lightning strike. Now, if they're testing a capability and then move that over, we could have some serious problems in a city. It could be used if they're weaponizing lightning, we're in big trouble, is what I'm saying. Okay. If they're weaponizing lightning, we're in trouble. That's a huge, huge weapon. So this is something of concern. And who knows, that might be the reason for CERN. They're trying to weaponize the changes going on in the earth. And this is very, godlike powers, right? So we know based on the book of Revelation that fire from the sky, fire from the heavens is part of the prophecies that we knew what we would see. And we saw already that there are weapons that are direct energy weapons that can, in fact, produce that. So is this another variation? Are they testing some new capability? We will watch with great interest, but that was definitely interesting stuff. So we're keeping an eye on that. And I strongly encourage everyone, again, to find, to be in the place that Elohim has for you during this next season will be of paramount importance. And again, the earth does reflect what is happening. How many of you have heard about the cicadas? Trillions of bugs to swarm once in 221-year event. So this hasn't happened since the day of the founding fathers of the United States of America. Love bugs, they're called, trillions of bugs to swarm a once per 220 years mating frenzy in weeks. It last happened to the founding fathers. 3 weeks in the process, many cicadas will be high in the trees. And so this is going to become a big, big deal. And it looks very ominous and has the potential, I imagine, to do harm to crops, to harm to a lot of things that otherwise would work fine, right? So once they hatch, the nymph feeds off root sap underground. It's time to mate. And so it's, again, there's no way that this doesn't affect the the ecological life in that region. And this is amongst a number of things that I think are going to start affecting, well, everybody all over the place. And as a matter of fact, Florida is really kind of becoming a center attention spot. I don't know if you guys heard about this. So you guys remember we were talking about these squatters, right? And someone thought I thought that was funny. Let me be very clear. I think it's absolutely horrific that you've got foreigners coming over, and their thinking is, let me just search the real estate listings and find a house that's vacant and squat in it. There's nothing funny about that. We can definitely comment about how ridiculous it is that there isn't a concerted effort to stop that. And it's very good to see that Governor DeSantis has signed a law that squatters can be immediately removed. So they're no longer going to be able to take advantage of this. Take a look at this, guys. So this is not funny, but it is the fruit of the curse. So the alien does come in and take things from you. That is the curse. That is literally what it says in Deuteronomy 28. So take a look at that. Governor DeSantis signs a law that allows squatters to be immediately evicted. Before this bill, squatters were considered to be tenants, and there would be a need to process them to evict them. But now this bill strips squatters of those rights. So this is a trend. I think it's going to pick up across the country. I think it's a very good trend. I think this is a good counter, but it doesn't end the reality that there's a curse, and the curse is going to continue regardless of what laws you pass. So you can't pass a law saying, hey, we're not going to be suffering from the curse. I'm sorry. Elohim will have something to say about that. So it doesn't matter, but it is at least wisdom to think about it and say, we've got to change the way we conduct ourselves. I believe they need to make a lot more changes. Repentance is required. There's no other way around this. And so this again is prophesied in Deuteronomy chapter 28 that would occur to a nation that forgets Elohim, that dishonors him and does not respect him, does not bring him his appropriate respect. And so this is a state where people go to retire and go to enjoy the sunset of their life, and it is under attack. So that's a very interesting thing that you can see in the scripture. Okay, so just understand that. And there was a particular guy who kind of went viral on TikTok, I think. He was a migrant influencer, and he was urging illegals to squat in U.S. homes. But I believe he was arrested here. This report reports that he was on the run. And I think since this report, he was in fact arrested. And he was caught in I think Illinois, if I remember correctly. So they are tracking these guys down. It's not going well for them. But nevertheless, understand that you cannot mitigate the consequences of sin. You can forgive the sin, right? But the consequences may still come and get you. And so this is what we're seeing, the consequences of sin in the nations, and the curse is rolling through the earth. So it's not just the USA that's got this problem. I believe you would see the same results throughout Europe, throughout much of Europe. As a matter of fact, there's horrific crime and abuses that have come from the alien or from the foreigner, or as the scripture calls them, the stranger, who will get up above and the resident will come down low. Why is this? According to the scripture, the prophecy is it will come as a result of dishonoring Elohim. It's that simple. So again, if you don't actually arrest the actual cause of the problem, well, you can pass laws to mitigate the consequence, but you're going to keep having the problem. And speaking of crazy, Canada is now adopting what looks like CCP type stuff. Canada's rolling out a social credit system on its citizens' bank accounts linked to obedience scores. Are you kidding me? So they understand the concept that they can punish for disobedience. You can't make this up, folks. Think in terms of the biblical, in terms of Elohim's authority. They're actually agreeing with him. They're agreeing that if you don't obey, you should suffer consequence. They're walking themselves right into judgment. Do you see this? They're literally agreeing that you should have to obey, except they're setting themselves up as the place to obey. Elohim has something to say about that, right? And so this story, I believe it's a video, so you can check it out on Remnant Watch. But yeah, they're rolling out a social credit system, so they want your obedience, and they're willing to punish you to get it. That's interesting. Don't you think that's interesting? They're walking themselves into their own judgment. By their own words, they will be condemned. The very things that they want to put upon you are the things that Elohim demands that we obey him and obey his word. And what would happen to our nations if we did that? Well, we would have a lot more peace, wouldn't we? So this is just wild that we're watching them literally agreeing with the word without knowing they're agreeing with it because they want that power. So they're usurping that power. So what did the enemy say in Isaiah? I will be like the Most High. This is very antichrist, satanic. I'm going to do it. They're going to obey me or else. Who else would exercise that kind of power except for Elohim, the one who wishes to be an imposter? And speaking of crazy, here's another story that I believe is going to directly affect us all. So it leads us into a second story that's going to be interesting. Now, you know, of course, about the fires that happen throughout Texas and how that is affecting beef prices and beef availability, just plain availability. Well, they had to get rid of competition because they're trying to bring in that fake stuff. You know what I mean? Okay. So they got to get rid of the real thing. And now this effort may not look like it, but this is also an effort to destroy the power of the truckers because of all the protests that have been effective against government controls. The truckers have been really one of the most effective mechanisms used in Europe and in Canada, remember? So they are getting ahead of this. Biden cracks down on diesel trucks in bid to fight climate change. Yeah, climate change, all right. And I believe the trucking industry is warning that stringent new measures could have far-reaching economic repercussions. This is a war, folks. Remember, it was the truckers who threatened to boycott New York. Again, it's a paywall here, but Biden administration is finalizing a long-awaited regulations targeting emissions. So they're using emissions as the cover story to take away this capability. This is scary stuff, folks, because after all, most people need trucks constantly coming in to your city. If you ever watch a traffic jam, you ever see traffic come to a standstill, when you're sitting in that traffic, take a look at how many trucks are on that road. And that's just one little section of cars. Just count how many there are. And then just imagine them going by at 60 miles an hour all day. The number of trucks and the number of trucking that has to come in to a city which doesn't grow any food, it needs to import everything in. I mean, this is like Hunger Games, okay? Everything must come to the capital, right? So all these cities need this trucking. You shut that down, we've got a problem. But don't worry, don't worry. Don't anybody get upset because we got a solution for this, okay? Um, we're gonna solve this with a different problem and a different solution that's going to come to the rescue. Don't worry about a thing. Because ready or not, self-driving semis are coming in, and self-driving semis, well, they don't protest. See where we're going here, folks? Perched in the cab of a 35,000-pound semi-truck lumbering south on Interstate 45, A.J. Jenkins watched the road while the big rig steering wheel slid through his hands. Jenkins was in the driver's seat, but he wasn't driving. The gigantic 18-wheeler was guiding itself. So they're starting to introduce the concept of the self-driving truck. Who saw that coming? And why would they do that? For multiple reasons, which, you might think, well, that's great. We won't have as much shortage. Why, everything will move better. Sure. That sounds good. Doesn't that sound beautiful? And in a perfect world, without nefarious actions, without demonic influences, without evil, that might be great. Right? If you had a perfectly good world with good people and everybody's out for each other's good, that would be wonderful. Except we don't have that. Instead, what we have is a world filled with threats like this. Cyber threats to U.S. power grids escalating as the election approaches. So let me see if I got this right. You're going to have self-driving trucks, and then they can be shut down centrally. You could literally park these trucks and say, sorry, supplies are not going into this city. And since you've got rid of the trucking people, you only have remote control trucks. This now becomes their new control matrix. U.S. power grids are facing heightening risks of cyber and physical attacks as the election nears, according to the nation's top reliable regulator. The increased threats come from state-backed hackers, as well as the type of physical assault that happened in North Carolina substations. Remember, we reported on that. And Chief Executive Officer, North American Electrical Reliability Corp, which sets federal standards. We're anticipating a fairly active year on the security front. So once again, seeding the narrative, letting you know ahead of time that you should expect some problems, which then they could blame on hackers, other bad actors, which I'm sure they have legislation ready to bring in even tighter controls on use of the internet or some other tight controls used to mitigate this obviously very bad threat, which is interrupting our trucking. It's all connected. Oh, and it shut down the banks. Oh, and you can't get money, so you can't buy gas. So you can't even go to the store, or if you want to, because the whole system goes down. This is something that we found out. If the internet goes down, it doesn't just affect, Facebook or something or YouTube. It affects banking. It affects being able to make a purchase of gasoline. A lot of gas pumps a lot of fuel or refueling is done digital. It's all digital. So if the digital goes down, well, that has the same effect of just shutting down entire areas. So this looks to me like a very slow moving but concerted effort to put the people under so much control that if you so much as burp in the wrong direction, you're going to be frozen. You're not doing anything. Okay. So again, we need to be aware of this, and just to make sure that we keep again pumping our, what do they call that now? The lab grown meat stuff and what have you. Well, now they're putting a stink eye on Texas beef. Was bad enough that there was a fire there. Now they're putting a stink on it. Rare human case of highly contagious bird flu confirmed in Texas. CDC says last person to have tested positive for virus and all this stuff. And they were testing cattle. Okay, so they weren't just testing people; they're testing cattle to say, oh, the cattle have this, right? Guys, this is part of the plan. So we can't be so naive to this. And a lot of what's happening is that our world is being literally taken over by demonic forces. Yeah, they claim dairy cows got it. Just it gets a little wild. So what do we know about that? All we know is that little by little, you're all realizing you can't trust what you once trusted. You can't relax anymore like you once relaxed. It's that simple. Okay. And, here's a story that is just mind boggling to me, but nevertheless is reflective of this mental degradation. And now we're going to turn on CERN. What could go wrong, right? We're going to scramble some more brains. Those that don't have the helmet of salvation could be subject to some serious demonic attacks, guys. This is just wild. But look at this, guys. A man in a scream mask. Did you hear about this? It's crazy. He is accused of killing his neighbor with a chainsaw and a knife. So here we got somebody acting out a movie. You can't make this up. Okay. 30-year-old Zach Russell Moyer reportedly admitted to going to his neighbor's house for the purpose of scaring him. Yeah, if you bring over a chainsaw, you're going to scare a lot of people, especially with a scream mask on. It worked. The chainsaw-wielding man in a scream costume is accused of killing his next-door neighbor in Pennsylvania. Now, isn't that the same place that they were bringing down police forces and shutting down entire shifts? I seem to remember. Pennsylvania State Police said in a news release posted in social media that the Lighton Borough Police Department was called to a home in Carbon County on Monday for a reported assault in progress. When the officers arrived, they found a 59-year-old man suffering from life-threatening injuries from being struck by a piercing object, according to the news release. The victim was taken to a local hospital where he was pronounced dead. And, of course, this is a very, very sad story. He went to the house with a knife. Moyer did, the assailant, and a small battery-powered chainsaw while wearing a mask and black costume-like garment consistent with the Scream movie character. The court documents obtained by Lehigh Valley Live said. He told police that he stabbed his neighbor in the head with the knife, the outlet reported, citing the court records, which added that the victim was struck with a chainsaw. Wow. Okay, it's this pure demonic. This is evil personified. And it's starting to get worse. So just, understand that it's a controlled demolition, mental controlled demolition. Speaking of demolition, I think you'd have to have been under a rock or maybe under a bridge. I don't know. You could have been. Could have been under the wrong bridge. If you were under the wrong bridge, well, it collapsed by being hit by a barge. Remember that? So we just saw this. This is horrific. And we looked at this, and now another one. So did you guys hear about the one in Oklahoma? Police state patrol says it's diverting traffic after a barge hit a bridge. So there's another one here. Okay. The Oklahoma State Patrol said Saturday has closed the highway south of Sallisaw after a barge struck a bridge over Arkansas River. What's going on here? Okay, what is going on here? Now, we have slowed down video on the other bridge, the one that is on the East Coast in Baltimore, and it's highly suspicious what we're seeing there. But here, troopers closed South USA Highway 59 after receiving word of the incident and diverted traffic from the area. So that effectively did the same thing if it shuts the bridge down, or if the bridge is declared unsound after the collision, same effect. You can't use it. You can't transport across it. You're now creating more choke points. It's going to make it easier for controlling population and movement and so forth. So again, what are we seeing here? What are we observing as we go? Okay. We're observing various ways in which we're being constricted. And I do believe that it is because it is a concerted effort. I don't believe it's coincidental. I don't believe it's accidental. Sorry, I'm just too awake to buy that. And so I think that is very concerning. And I think it reflects what the mental state of the nations is. There's a lot going on that I believe is affecting the mental state. One of the things that we are seeing, and we've talked about consistently, is that in what was considered the safe area, ministry, you're seeing a lot more activity that is not good. Okay. And here we've got a story here where two mega church pastors, and it's funny, they call these mega churches. My brother Tony said he drove by one that was called Powerhouse Church, and the lights were off and they were closed. It didn't apparently the power stopped there. Something went wrong. But anyway, mega church pastors lose ministry credentials after confessing to affair. So the hits just keep on rolling. We've actually seen this story developing over some time. Two Australian Pentecostal megachurch pastors have temporarily lost their ministry credentials, and we're seeing a lot of this kind of thing coming out. There was one pastor, really big megachurch pastor by the name of T.D. Jakes that we talked about, who's now been named in a lawsuit involving P. Diddy and that whole deal. So it's really interesting. Corey Turner, the global senior pastor of Numa Church, confessed to having an affair with Stacy Hillier, a female pastor within the megachurch, which has branches in Thailand and the United States. So, these things are starting to really manifest. And this reminds me of the prophecy that nothing hidden will stay. All things that are hidden will be revealed. And so we're seeing a lot of those effects. And I do believe that, unfortunately, here's this story. I'm going to pull this up. A lot of these effects are starting to manifest. There's no way around it. Here's another example of that, where the Dallas megachurch pastor, I think we already talked about this, or maybe not, I don't know. T.D. Jakes named in a lawsuit against Sean Diddy Combs. So he was actually named. So much for, remember when we first reported on this, it was, oh, absolutely not. This is ridiculous. And how dare you? And, and all that. Well, as it turns out, there's more to this. There's more to this story. Right. And so, of course, now you're seeing raids occurring. And what are we watching here? What are we really seeing? Well, we're seeing the stars fall from the heavens, just as Mashiach said. The stars are falling from the heavens. And I think that's what you're going to continue to see. Um, I don't remember if we talked about this last week, but Houston's mayor said that they're broke. So this is really crazy. The cities are struggling with economically being able to control the people. So you got the UN going to Haiti. You got control things are starting to come in. You've got mass firings happening all over. The economy is suffering badly. It is really becoming quite a mess out there in many ways. Uh, One of the areas that have really been hit hard. Let me see if I can find the story here. Is the commercial um, lending. I know I had a story here about that, so I'll see if I can find it. But I know the banks on commercial real estate are really suffering. And so this has the potential to really tank what's left of the economy. Yeah, here it is, a meltdown in commercial real estate. So this has the potential to really do some harm in case you've got money in the bank. So you see how that can ripple? Bloomberg is warning that defaults in commercial real estate loans could topple hundreds of U.S. banks. So these commercial loans are a huge part of their portfolio. And if they start to fail because no one's going downtown, people aren't doing the same things, the patterns of society have changed. They're seeing some serious effects to set the mood. This new study predicts that nearly half of downtown Pittsburgh, that's interesting, same place they're suspending one of the um, shifts of the police departments. But anyhow, I digress. Office space could be vacant in 4 years. Major cities such as San Francisco are already spotting zombie apocalypse downtowns with abandoned office buildings baking in the sun. So what happened? The yo-yo interest rates first flooded real estate with low rates and cheap money, and then they overbuilt. And now they're taking it away because they don't have the money to keep it going. And this is going to be cataclysmic. It's going to cause collapse, and this will then ripple into the banking sector. Is it real or is it manufactured? Does it matter? If the net effect is banks are closed and you now are forced into what they want you to use versus being able to be self-sufficient and on your own supply, if you will, they win. So it doesn't matter if it's legitimate or not. I've heard discussions where like, well, I'm not sure that's real. It doesn't matter. If they use it as a cover story, they can then bring in what they want, which is a shift in society in the way in which they can control your activity. And banking is a big central factor in the way that we function. So if banks fail because commercial real estate tanks, well, that's where we're going to end up. And that, unfortunately, is where our nation is. So there's a tremendous amount of demonic activity I see continuing to increase. It's getting exposed, but it doesn't matter that it's being exposed because it's everywhere. You can take your camera out, go walking down a city, and you're likely to film a crime. You're likely to film some type of event. I'm seeing a tremendous flood of videos on things like BitChute and other platforms that are just everyday violence, everyday horrific events. The young lady that was beaten into a coma, she finally woke up, by the way, and doesn't remember a thing. So her memory's shot, but at least she survived. So those that prayed for her recovery, well, she was blessed with recovery. But you're seeing this more and more. You're seeing more and more horrific attacks, crazy attacks, and now with the CERN thing, I'm telling you guys, we got to keep an eye on this, because if we suddenly see people just literally go off the deep end, it may be that they figured out the frequency without their mind mapping of just how to make people go mad. All the more reason for you to have the mind of Mashiach with the helmet of salvation in this hour. Well, that's it for tonight. That's our report. I pray that it's been a blessing to you. Thank you to every one of you who continue to share the links and encourage our brothers and sisters to watch along with us, and let us keep our eyes open so that we're not overwhelmed in this hour. Let us be sober and vigilant as we await the coming of the King. God bless.